going, and then I'll start the meeting.
And Madam Clerk, I did send him a text as well. So
Okay, thank you.
All right, we are good to start.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Welcome. This is the first climate change task force. So the first item on the agenda is to elect a chair and a vice chair. So I will open up the floor for nominations. We have Warden McQueen, Councillors Woodbury, Hicks, and Carlton. And I will open up the floor for nominations for chair.
I would ask if anybody's interested in doing it. Sue, would you be interested? I see that nod. No, yes, yes. No.
I think not at the very first meeting. I would prefer not.
I'm going to nominate Sue. I'm going to nominate Sue.
I would second that nomination. I know that you can always say no, but I hope you'll say no like this.
John, did you want to jump in and volunteer?
No, I was going to nominate a Cash if he was here, but
Yeah, we can still do that.
I definitely would support.
He's not here, yes.
Yeah, I definitely would support you, Sue.
Okay, so we have a move by Warden McQueen and seconded by Councillor Hicks, that Councillor Carlton be the chair. Any other nominations? Councillor Carlton, are you willing to be the chair?
I will, against my better judgment.
Thank you. We will help you out any way we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. I should ask for nominations, a mover to close nominations. Councillor Hicks?
Sure.
Thank you. All right, now I'm looking for nominations for vice chair.
Madam Clerk, I'd like to nominate John Woodbury.
Okay, do I have a second? Thank you. Councillor Hicks seconds. Any other nominations?
Speechless.
Moving nominations close.
I so move.
Thank you. Councillor Woodbury, would you accept the vice chair position?
Yeah, I couldn't find the leave the meeting button. So yes.
Thank you very much.
Good.
And Councillor Carlton, as the chair, I will turn it over to you. I think Randy's going to start us off and then he will assist in working through the agenda.
Okay, thank you. So you have called the meeting to order. So we're down at declaration
Yes, I
of pecuniary interest.
That's
if
correct.
anyone has one at any point, they can declare it. And we move on to item 4, review background reports and overview of current climate change initiatives. So is this now over to Randy?
Yes, thank you, Chair Carlton, and good afternoon, everyone. I believe this is the third time we tried to have this meeting, so I guess third time is always a charm. I think the first meeting, I believe, was canceled due to a snowstorm, and then the second time we didn't have quorum. Add in some delays due to pandemic and finding a replacement to fill the vacant task force seat. That leads us to finally being able to have this task force meeting, which I'm very excited about. For today's meeting, we thought it'd be good to provide an overview of the work done to date regarding the Climate Change Action Plan, provide an overview of the Climate Change Action Plan process, talk about next steps, and of course, some feedback from the task force regarding some of the comments that we've received to date as part of the engagement process that we're undertaking, and where you see this going from a policy and action plan perspective. So just to provide a bit of a refresher regarding Climate Change Action Plan work. So back in 2019, you may recall that Grey County was fortunate enough to have a project selected by the University of Guelph master's students to undertake a study on developing a climate change action plan. And links to the initial report that identified this project, as well as a link to the report when the students completed their work, were attached to this agenda. And the students' report provided recommendations for the creation of a climate change action plan with the aim of mitigating the county's impact on climate change and preparing for its effects. The report completed by the Guelph master students did a literature review, drawing on examples of other municipal action plans that were similar in nature to Grey County. This led to a number of recommendations for creating a climate change action plan, And this actually helped to inform the request for proposal that was prepared and was issued for hiring the consultant that is helping us through this process, which Hibba will highlight later on in the meeting. The master's students also conducted interviews with county and municipal staff to provide an understanding of existing initiatives that were already underway and what changes could be made to improve. The report also provided policy recommendations as well as operational improvement recommendations, and these all can be considered as part of the climate change action plan process. And just to highlight some of those recommendations that the students came up with, from a policy perspective, they recommended looking at things like setting minimum density thresholds for new green development within settlement areas, looking at providing incentives for infill developments, implementing the recommendations of the county's natural heritage system study, green and gray through Recolor Gray, which we can check that box off because that's been implemented. Developing a scoring system to evaluate new development proposals, looking at several criteria such as density, walkability, environmental protection, and climate change preparedness. Limiting the number of new residential lots created outside of settlement areas was also a policy recommendation from the students. Supplementing the county's policies with county-specific policies and municipal official plans was also a recommendation. In terms of operational improvements, the students recommended that we start tracking monthly energy consumption in government buildings, which we are doing some of that work already. Creating facility and equipment retrofit programs, implementing anti-idling policies for government and private vehicles, upgrading municipal lighting to LED, adding allowing telecommuting for employees where feasible, continuing to support initiatives like SWIFT and looking for opportunities to expand broadband, which no doubt the pandemic has also highlighted a great need there as well. They also recommended going paperless as much as possible, including digital forms and applications where feasible. And I'd like to say, just in terms of on county planning end, we made a lot of headways thanks to the help of IT support and in developing our new planning application tracking system. We are pretty much with any new applications have pretty much gone completely paperless, which is great. And also the recommendation to continue our paved shoulder program, which of course is great work that Pat and his team have been doing with in transportation services. The other report linked in the agenda was regarding enrollment in the Partners for Climate Change Protection Program. And Hibba will discuss this program further as part of her presentation. So that just provides an overview of the previous reports that were linked in the agenda regarding climate change. Hibba will provide an overview of the comments we received as part of the council workshop held in March, just as a bit of a refresher of what council was indicating back in early March. She will also then go through the presentation linked to the agenda, which among other things will provide an overview of the action plan process to date, talk about our revised engagement strategy given pandemic restrictions. We'll also provide an overview of the climate change survey results, which we recently received from the consultant. We then would like to have a discussion regarding the task force mandate, the role, objectives, and then have a roundtable discussion with the task force regarding climate change initiatives that are either happening or are planned within your member municipality. So with that, that's just an overview of those reports, and happy to take any questions or comments before Hibba moves into item number 5.
Does anyone have any comments or questions for Randy at this time? I don't see any, Randy, so I think we could probably move forward with Hibba and her comments.
Great, excellent. Thanks, Sue.
Good afternoon, everyone. I thank you for having me, and I'm happy to be here and speak on some of the work that the county is doing in terms of the climate change action plan. So just going with number 5, just speaking, reviewing the March 12th council workshop comments. The consultant ICLEI Canada had created a meeting summary that hopefully was attached to the agenda that everyone had some time to review and read over. But I'd quickly like to just go through that meeting just to kind of refresh everyone about maybe some of the ideas and thoughts that were brought up in that meeting, just to get us thinking about some of what was mentioned. So as mentioned, ICLEI Canada is our consultant. We selected them through an RFP process. I'm going to go into some of their background, but they are a climate change leader, not only in Canada, but globally, have been instrumental in creating a lot of policies and guidelines for municipalities and helping them creating climate change action plans. So they're well versed in some of this work, are really knowledgeable, and have been absolutely wonderful to work with so far. So we had Sarah Shenstone Harris and Hiba Kareem from ICLEI come up on March 12th and just kind of give council an overview of their background and what they imagine climate change to look like in Grey County and what the role of the climate change action plan will be in the county. So they discussed some of those ideas. One of the activities that they did, hopefully you'll all remember, is Postcards from the Future. This activity was to start getting us to think about vision statements and kind of start getting us to think about what we want the county to look like in 10 to 20 years. And so some of the questions they asked us included, what does success look like in our county? And what does it look like for Grey County as a community? And what does it look like for the corporation? And some of the feedback that we heard from councillors included, we want to have a healthy, vibrant community that is confident in its long-term economic, social, cultural, and environmental sustainability. Some other comments included more homes that are less reliant or completely off-grid. Majority of cars being electric with necessary infrastructure to support them. Garbage waste will be a profit center. A less warm climate and temperature, and achieve our set GHG reduction targets, and greater appreciation for the need to protect our green spaces. So those were some of the notable ideas that came out from that vision, what we want our community to look like in 20 years. That's what council indicated. The second activity that the consultant led us through was the ingredients for success. And this activity was meant to identify factors that would help ensure successful development and implementation of the climate change action plan. So they wanted to know from council what would be the key steps, the key ingredients that needs to be part of this process that would help the success in developing this plan and implementing this plan. And some of those common ingredients that were identified by council includes measures to increase community engagement and buy-in, measures to increase communication and education with staff, member municipalities, residents, and businesses, and both short-term and long-term goals that are SMART. So the focus here would be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And I really want to highlight the measurable and achievable. The focus of this plan is to make sure that all of the policies that we've put forth are very specific, they're measurable, and ultimately achievable so that it results in the success, long-term success of this plan. Some common ingredients to ensure successful implementation of the CAP included adequate and committed funding. And I think this includes not just from a municipal and county level, but also from a provincial and federal level. So trying to get their buy-in as well. Appropriate staff capacity at both levels, and collaboration with community partners and other municipalities. And some other notable ingredients that was also discussed is, again, provincial support from a policy and program and leadership perspective, appropriate data sources and information, and setting targets to implement the initiatives. So those were some of the key ideas that came out of that council workshop that the consultant had done. If there's any questions on that, I'm happy to take that.
Does anyone on committee have any questions? Excellent report, Hiba. Thank you. So if
I'm just going to share my screen for this presentation. Are you able to see a full screen of the presentation?
yes.
Awesome, perfect. So just moving into point number 6, climate change action plan outline. So the county has been working on a Grey County climate change action plan, as you all know, and I'm just going to be going through this a little bit more diligently and trying to provide a lot of information. So please stop me anytime and let me know if you have any questions. But I'm hoping to kind of go through broadly what climate change action is, kind of talk about some of the terminology that's used within the climate change world, just so that we all are kind of understanding what some of these terms mean, and then kind of talking about the role of this task force and some of the other committees we've created, and then finally ending on some of the early stages of policy that we think will be included as part of the plan. So before we talk about our plan, why do we create a plan for climate change? Why is climate change important? So it's a huge issue that we're not only facing globally, but locally at all stages. So it's important for us to address the impacts of climate change, no matter how small. And some of the benefits of having a climate change action plan for our community includes reducing our energy use and saving money, not only corporately, which is really important because it saves our energy dollars at the corporate level, but it's also very important from the community. And this is as highlighted in the survey results, it's a huge issue for the community. Energy costs are going up, and they want to see more alternatives to helping them reduce some of those costs. Encourage economic growth and green jobs through low carbon investment. The green sector is growing. We know it's growing. More innovative companies are being created. There are far more jobs that are being created, and Grey County as a community can capitalize on that and encourage economic growth. So this can be a great opportunity for our small businesses, for our community leaders to access some of that money in the green sector. It improves energy security and increases our environmental stewardship. The more people know about the natural environment, the impacts of climate change, the more they are aware of what we are potentially losing, the more it becomes an important issue and makes them responsible for for protecting our environment. So it ultimately it's important for education and helping people understand the importance of our environment and keeping that for future generations. A big one is it's the aid and protection of county-owned assets. So the county can benefit from becoming more sustainable and energy efficient. It can result in saved in tax dollars, and that's huge economically. Create a sustainable community through adaptation and mitigation. I'm going to get into those terms, but we can create more sustainable communities through making sure that we're adopting new innovative ideas in terms of climate action, but just in terms of overall technology as well. It helps us become a more sustainable community. And overall, generally, having a climate action plan improves our health and well-being of the community and corporation. So as Randy mentioned, the Partners for Climate Protection PCP program was one that we enrolled in 2019. It's a program that was created joint by ICLEI Canada, our consultant, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. This program is meant to help municipalities, guide municipalities through a climate action planning process. So they set out 5 milestones, which I will cover, but the program is meant to provide municipalities with resources, grant opportunities, and specialized help through ICLEI and FCM to help them guide through making a climate action plan and becoming more sustainable. And it's one that has 400 municipalities from coast to coast of all levels that have joined, who are interested in accessing the incredible amount of resources that are provided through this program. And it's one that I think it can benefit, has benefited us greatly. We have 10 years to work through the program and work through the milestones. So the milestones include, the first milestone is create a baseline emissions inventory and forecast. The second milestone is set emission reduction targets. The third is develop a local action plan. The fourth one is implement that action plan, and then fifth is monitor and report on the results of that plan. So through our work with ICLEI Canada, we will be working through milestone 1, 2, and 3, and then the long term will be to implement the plan and then monitor the success of that plan. We are currently in between stage 1 and 2, so we are. I will get into this again later on in the presentation, but we are doing analyzing the data, doing an inventory and forecast setting evaluation. We are in the process of setting targets, and then more importantly, engaging with the community to see what they want in the policy as a whole. The target completion for this plan is winter 2021. Originally, we had planned for fall 2020, but the world is much different than what it was when we planned for this plan. So COVID has definitely impacted, as many things, this plan. So we're hoping our new timeline will be to complete this plan by winter 2021. So the role of municipalities, it's always important to look at the role that municipalities play. And through our research, we found that over 50% of emissions are under the direct control or influence of local governments, such as our member municipalities. So major emission sources in our communities include power and heating our homes and buildings, transportation and vehicle use, generating and managing waste. And our municipalities and our powers through our bylaws and through our control and through our influence, we can impact them through our built environments, so such as through planning, through transportation system, as some of the work that Pat's been doing, and through our waste management system. So there's a lot of ways that municipalities can influence climate change. We are a small but mighty source of influence, and I think that's important to consider when we're having these conversations, that there's multiple ways in which we can influence climate change at the local level. So our plan, the Great County Climate Change Action Plan, this plan will identify a path forward for sustainable community and identify and close gaps in the existing policy framework to achieve the vision and goals that will be developed in the plan. When we began talking about climate change at the planning team, we realized there's a lot that we're doing at the county in terms of climate change that doesn't directly have the term climate change written on it. So through our official plan, through our recreational trails master plan, through our forest management bylaw, through multiple policies in other departments, we're doing a lot in terms of climate change. So we wanted to build a policy that highlights all of that work, but identifies some of the gaps that that doesn't connect those policies well. So this policy is really doesn't replace any of that work that's already happening within the county. It just helps to bring all of those policies together and fill in some of those gaps that might exist within our policies that already exist. The plan will ultimately develop a results-oriented policy document that will identify various projects and further policy initiatives that can be implemented to achieve climate change goals and overall greenhouse gas reductions. So again, the intent here is to find the gaps within our policies that exist and kind of find policy solutions that can ultimately lead to GHG reductions within our community and at the corporate level. So talking about climate change. So it's really important sometimes when we talk about climate change is to make sure our terminology and our wording is sometimes it can be misleading. There's adaptation and mitigation are two of the big words that are often used in climate conversations, and there's multiple interpretations depending on what policy you're reading and in what part of the world. So there's no correct or one defined definition of what these terms mean, but generally this is a graphic from the Region of Waterloo's climate change action plan, which we thought represented well with what we think the definitions of these terms mean. And I just want to kind of just point to the differences in what these terms are, just because we will be mentioning a lot of mitigation and adaptation as the presentation goes on. So adaptation is any actions that are taken by a municipality or through a policy that manages the impacts of climate change. So this isn't addressing the causes of climate change. This is addressing the impacts of climate change. So that could be including flooding that happens in our communities, infrastructure and building design, disaster management. So these are all solutions that help manage the impact of climate change, versus mitigation is the active policies that reduce and eliminate the emissions that cause climate change. So that includes sustainable transportation, energy efficiency, energy renewable, all of these solutions to reduce our impact on the climate. And adaptation would be, again, finding policy solutions that mitigate the impact to our built infrastructure from climate change. And in many policies, you'll see that we can have both solutions can address both both mitigation and adaptation. So urban forestry, complete communities, water and energy conservation are all policy solutions that address both mitigation and adaptation. And we're hoping through our policies to find more solutions that address both. The climate change action plan will be a mitigation focused plan. So when we apply through the PCP program is meant for mitigation policy development. So our climate change action plan will be a mitigation focused climate change plan, but that's not to say we won't address adaptation. There will be a component of the plan that looks at adaptation and provides recommendation on adaptation policies to our municipalities. And we're hoping that through our work, we can do some of the background research and data collection, and then the municipalities can take on some of the work of doing some of the adaptation focused work. But our plan is a mitigation focused plan that will provide recommendations on adaptation. The plan will be broken into two sections. It will be, it'll have a community component and a corporate emissions component. So when we were having conversations on climate change, it was really important for staff to have a corporate emissions focus and really focus on some of the solutions that we can do internally to address climate change. The thought was, if we're going to go out into the community and tell them that this is the stuff that they need to do to address climate change, we should be doing it internally too, and being leaders in that sense. So the corporate emissions component of our plan is very important. It's one that we are going to take lots of strides and lots of opportunities to make sure that we are being trendsetters, we are being innovative, and we are being leaders from that perspective before we go out into the community or our member municipalities and tell them to take on some of this work too. So that was very important to us. Some of the theme areas of the plan. So we've broken the plan down into 6 theme areas, which are buildings, transportation, waste, agriculture, land use, and energy. These are really broad themes that cover almost every aspect of our communities. The plan will break these down further and kind of look at some of these in more detail, but generally the plan will be categorized into these 6 theme areas for the community portion. And then our corporate portion will be broken down in terms of our department structure at the county level. Some of the objectives of this plan is to understand the current and projected emissions. So a part of the early stages of this plan was to do an analysis of what does the Grey County's GHG emissions look like. So what are we actually producing at a community and corporate level? Analyzing that data really helps us set a realistic target for the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years, and helps us understand the ways in which we can reduce our targets. Through some of that analysis of our data, we are hoping to develop targets and set goals again for the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years. The project will identify actions to then reduce those emissions. We will prepare a policy document and then work through the first 3 milestones of the PCP program. Unfortunately, we didn't have the chance to update this graphic yet, but this is our timeline, or was our proposed timeline before COVID-19. We had worked through phase 1 and 2 of the plan before COVID hit, which was just establishing our committees, our working groups, developing our communications and engagement plan, collecting all that data that was required to really analyze some of our emissions, doing some of that data analysis, the initial data analysis, seeing what our projections will look like, establishing an initial vision for the policy. So that was some of the work that we did with council and hearing some feedback on that, and then identify options for corporation and community GHG reduction targets. So just having those initial conversations on what we think those targets would look like for our communities. Phase 2 and 3 was the biggest impacted phase of COVID. This was the phase in which we were going to be carrying out our engagement strategy. We are currently have picked up this this phase in April late April, early May. We started picking up the plan again and going through some of our engagement work. And so we're currently working through an adapted engagement strategy. And we're trying to identify existing plans and policies, programs, and proposed opportunities where identifying some of those policy gaps. We're doing an inventory mapping and analysis. We're finalizing our corporate and community targets. And then we're going to be finalizing our vision statement for the plan. Phase 4 and 5 will be at the end of, will be fall 2020 and into winter 2021. And this will be developing a draft plan, going back to the community with that draft plan, hearing their feedback on what their opinion is, and based on what we have put together. Finalizing some of those data and those targets, and then hopefully finalizing a policy document by the end of winter 2021. Engagement. So when we started talking about climate change, it was very important that we had specialized groups that gave us information, and it was really important for us to have groups that we could talk to who could help us guide us through this process. So in having conversations at the planning team, we thought having these 3 groups would be very important as part of the policy development process. So the first one would be the Climate Change Task Force, which is yourselves, which is made up of county council and senior management staff. And they would be important in providing strategic direction, vision, and guidance on the plan. So letting us know what you want to see in the plan, what is important to your communities, and ultimately how the plan will be shaped. So this group is very critical to that. The Climate Change Internal Working Group, this group is made up of staff from various departments at the county. And they are important from a corporate perspective because they're going to provide a strategic input on some policies that we want to implement at a corporate level. And this group is very important as a sounding board. So if we put ideas forward, they're going to let us know what works in terms of their departmental context, help inform the process and recommendations in terms of the corporate part of the policy. And then the last group is the Climate Change External Working Group, which is made up of members from local health units, conservation authorities, member organizations, academics, and the public. This is a group that was created by the Public Health Unit and which I chair, currently. And this is a group with wide variety of knowledge and skills who all have an interest in climate change. So the common theme within this group is that we're all doing climate related work in our communities and have different expertise. So that was very important as part of the community section of the plan, because it would help us understand what would work from a community level. They would provide us with local expertise, suggestions, recommendations, and help inform the process and the plan in terms of what would be feasible and implementable from a community perspective. The current engagement process has changed and is now mostly online based. So we have conducted surveys. So the general survey, which I will touch upon some of the results from later on, closed in the end of July. The beginning of July. We had about 230 respondents on that survey. And the general survey touched on all 6 theme areas and got very detailed information on what the community would like to see in terms of the overall plan and the community portion of the plan. We currently have an agricultural survey out. This is more targeting the ag community. It was really important for us to make sure that we got detailed feedback from the ag community. They are an innovative sector that are doing a lot in terms of climate change, that have a lot of ideas on how to impact climate change in a positive way. And it was important for us to hear that feedback. They are the experts in the field, and it's make sure that before we put policies forward in terms of addressing climate change from an agricultural perspective, we need to know what our experts are, what's happening on the ground, what the experts think is feasible, and letting us know what they want to see in the plan. So those are the 2 surveys that we have had and are currently available. We provide online updates on the plan through our social media sites and the Greg County website. We are currently running an online workshop series. This workshop series is every Wednesday for the month of August and in the first week of September. And this is just a workshop that kind of touches on the same themes and ideas that was available in the general survey, but more in a conversational and discussion-based setting, and where we can run through some of the activities that the consultant had done with council, with members of the community, and trying to connect feedback through that. Sometimes surveys are not the best way to get quantitative information. So these conversations are really important because it allows for idea development and having just really good conversations about what's happening in our communities. We're having targeting online meeting and focus group with member municipalities. So we have set up a meeting in October where we're going to be running a workshop with our member municipalities. We are looking to set up workshops with a key economic sector group. So as I mentioned, agricultural community through the survey, but we are also looking to set up a workshop with the agricultural community. We have currently set up a workshop with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, and some of the other groups that we're hoping to target is the tourism community, the small business community, and the Indigenous community. We think all of these groups are very important part of the conversation and can provide us with a lot of information and feedback on what is good policy for the plan. And then we are hoping to potentially have an open house in fall 2020. And this is all dependent on the status of COVID. So we are hoping to do some face-to-face engagement, but ultimately it's not something that we can plan for currently. So we're hoping to do as much engagement as we can through our online workshops and through some of our online mediums, but still plan for maybe a few potential open house that gives people the opportunity to engage in a face-to-face manner. The Climate Change Task Force. So I I'm going to be honest, I'm very interested in hearing what this group thinks their role and responsibility is in terms of the climate change action plan. I've kind of put together some broad ideas of what I think the role of this group can be in the climate change action plan, but I'm very interested in hearing what members of this committee or members of this task force think their role is, and I'm happy to completely go off this or expand this, but I think you will be very important in guiding, critiquing, and providing suggestions to the plan. So we've already kind of gone through some of the target setting, visioning portions through the council workshop, but providing us with goals, objectives, actions, and implementations that you'd like to see in the plan. Giving us advice and knowledge of what's happening in your communities. I talk to climate change advocates and community groups almost on a daily basis, and there's a lot happening in our communities in terms of climate change. And I'd love to hear some of the work that that's happening and that you hear of. And so that'd be really important as part of the process. You'll be acting as a sounding board to our policy development, so letting us know what you think is works as from a policy perspective for your municipalities, and ultimately what you'd like to see in the plan, identifying potential issues or concerns, and ultimately a two-way communication, us providing you feedback on what the plan will look like, and you letting us know what the plan you'd like to see in the plan. And finally, potential climate change actions. This, I'm going to be honest, this is very, very early stages of policy actions. We haven't had many discussions on what we'd like to see in terms of policy in the plan. These are just some themes that are starting to emerge from some of the engagement work that we're doing. So these are very early stages, and none of these policy actions have been kind of thought through, but these are some of the themes that we think would be important to include as part of the plan. And they include building and fleet retrofits from a corporate perspective to become more energy efficient, updating our county and municipal forest management and tree preservation bylaws, and kind of making sure that municipalities are kind of thinking about tree preservation bylaws. Managing our ecologically sensitive areas, so our shorelines, through policy tools such as easement, buffers, bylaws. Infrastructure upgrades which support working from home opportunities. So COVID has taught us that we can work from home and be efficient and really accomplish some of our same goals. So how can we support some of that work that's happening in our homes from an infrastructure perspective? And the other one that was a big theme that came out was electric vehicle charging stations. So a lot of our members of our communities would like to see more electric vehicle charging stations. So how can we upgrade our infrastructure to support that? Integrate renewable energy design considerations for our county and municipal owned buildings. So how can we be more sustainable in terms of alternatives energy sources such as wind and solar? Promote participation in the Canada Ontario Environmental Farm Program, or ALIS, to encourage farmers to prepare and implement environmental farm plans and increase knowledge of mitigation best practices. Again, just continuing that conversation with our ag community. From multiple conversations I have, they are an innovative bunch that are already doing a whole lot in terms of climate change. So just getting their feedback on what they're already doing and what we can do to support the work that's already being happening in our communities. And consider incentives for energy efficiency and GHG reduction. So that's all I had in terms of the presentation. I'm happy to take some questions on that.
Excellent presentation, Heba. Thank you very much. I think you've got a lot of the work done for us already. Are there any comments or questions from anyone on the committee? Mr. McQueen?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for all that great information you've put together. But a couple things, and certainly I think a good reflection of what we probably have seen through COVID-19 is a great improvement to our environment is the lack of transportation vehicles that have been moving around. One is planes and cars and all that stuff, and just happened to be that's just the way I guess in a positive sense of COVID-19, it's a reflection of just what happened on that sense. And I think it's been showing that planes are, I think there's something like 6,000 or 7,000 flights a day that normally have been flying, and you can imagine the impact. And along with vehicles, now vehicles are back probably at their level as they were before. But I just thought, we know that those are the main sort of contributors to climate change. As far as on the agricultural side, and I think maybe you were in conversation with a lady named Carrie, what's her name here? Carrie James. And it was with regards to different kinds of processes of agricultural farming that are probably better for the environment. And some of those points, and you mentioned agriculture. And again, with regards to agriculture, carbon capturing or holding the carbon in the soil is a good thing, because that seems to be a big contributor as well. And if you hadn't had I think she did say she would maybe reach out to her. I told her to reach out to you or others. And with regards to just different ways of we've had conversations in the past with no-till and that type of thing. But there's also ways of building up soil health, reducing erosion. Also, these new practices of farming also are very resilient during drought times. And we see that also through certain changes to our climate as we come into wet areas, or we also have dry times. And there are new types of farm practices that are more resilient to erosion or drought. And so that's just one other part of us all working together, moving toward a better place. And it just takes one is the knowledge, and two is just the seeing it is. And that's one of the things that she was mentioning was it just takes farmers to make that change to do new ways of farming and that type of thing. The other thing is certainly, and I know in Grey Highlands, we were in the process of buying an electric car. I know Pat's sitting there thinking about that electric snowplow, I know. But, it's interesting that the largest or the most valued car manufacturing today in the world is Tesla, electric car maker. So that, I think, reflects somewhat on that part. And so we, in our Grey Highlands budget, so we budgeted a complete electric car, no hybrid. We went for, the full electric car, and we did actually go out for a tendering, but because of COVID-19, we felt it was probably prudent not to maybe move through that this year, and obviously, lack of transportation. So that's still something, but on that is the need of charging stations. And so again, whether there's funding out there or we need to partnership with a private business for locations and stuff, I think the Walmart Canadian Tire parking lot here in Owen Sound has some charging stations. And unbelievable is the amount of Tesla cars I see on the road. My neighbors are buying them. Everybody's buying them. It's just, and that's, again, I think that whole mentality of thought and change has started. And I think that is sort of that new ball that's rolling down the, in the sense of people are starting to think that way. And it just takes time to bring in those. And I think from what you're also saying, Hibbett, and in that report is, sometimes if we can all do a little bit, it all means a big part to our environment. And, we just have to look at ways of doing that. So I think we're on a great plot here in the sense of where we're heading with the task force and moving forward as Grey County. And I think we have to lead by example. And I think this is just a great opportunity that what we're starting here is to lead and show that if Grey County can do it, others can do it. And I know, Pat, they are working on electric snowplows. I know they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden McQueen. Are there comments or questions from anyone else on the committee? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on.
I'm sorry, Chair Carlton, I do see Councillor Hicks.
Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm listening to Hiba's presentation. I quickly realized how wholly inadequate I am to be sitting on this body because the expertise that's there is just mind-boggling. But it also allows you to take stock. I think the presentation was very good for that. I remember sitting on the Town of Blue Mountains Task Force, and when we took stock of what are we actually doing, it was quite significant to see that. And so in this task force, again, I see a similar thing happening where we're looking at, well, where are we? And we're actually doing pretty darn good from what I'm seeing in the report. Following up on the warden's comments about fleets, I remember going to, I can't remember if it was Good Roads Conference or maybe AMO, I think it was Good Roads. And I went to a presentation put on by a company called BYD. Does that ring a bell for anyone? Build Your Dreams. They are apparently the largest manufacturer of electric vehicles in the world. I believe that they were China-based, but exist all over the world. And it appears that many municipalities seem to be buying in on this whole program they put together where they look at what your needs. So we need 2 or 3 garbage trucks, and we need a snow plow, and we need 50 buses, and we need, whatever those needs are. And they custom build these vehicles that you need. And the other side of that is putting together a power plant that's going to power up these vehicles each day. So I was really blown away, quite impressed, including with their warranties, by the way, which were, I think, a minimum 35-year warranty on the batteries for these vehicles. So lots happening, and I'm really impressed with what I see from the report that Hiba just gave.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. Are there any other comments? Try to take my time and pay closer attention so I don't miss anybody. Okay, so if we could move on to item number 7, the engagement strategy, a verbal update. Who is presenting that?
That would be me as well.
Okay, thank you, Emma.
You're going to hear me be talking for a little bit longer, unfortunately. So I've kind of gone through the engagement strategy again in the presentation, but and just quickly going over, we have the 3 groups that help us look at each focus of the plan. And then currently what's happening in terms of engagement is we have the ag survey out, and that will be ending at the end of potentially this week. And if we need to extend it again, we can extend it to next week. So if you please get the word out on that survey if you're involved in the ag community. It's important to hear feedback from that community. We will be doing more doing the workshop series, as I mentioned, in throughout the month of August and in early September. We're happy to meet with any group that's interested in having a one-on-one workshop and extend any more workshops to or add any more workshops to the series, just so that we're making sure that everyone is able to provide feedback. We do have some groups that have signed up, so that includes the Interior Federation of Agriculture and the Escarpment Biosphere Conservancy. So we are looking to do more targeted workshops with those groups. We have set up a meeting, as I mentioned, with our member municipalities and trying to get staff perspective from our municipalities on what they think should be included as part of the plan. Our focus in September will be also reaching out to those groups that I've identified. So our ag group, our small business groups, our tourism groups, or the Indigenous groups, those are all key groups that we want to make sure that we engage with. So we will be doing one-on-one workshops with those groups as well. And then just potentially having some face-to-face engagement in fall. I do want to mention just very quickly that this isn't the only time that there will be opportunity to engage. There is a lot of conversation about making sure that there is a good chunk of portion of engagement happening after we release the draft plan. So it's making sure that some of these conversations that we're currently having are very broad, and so sometimes having a draft plan, having some policies in front of the community can help focus some of the those conversations and can get them thinking about maybe what we're talking about from a policy perspective. So I sometimes feel we can have more targeted conversations. So we are hoping to do some more engagement after the draft plan is released to the public. That's my engagement update. If anybody has any questions on that.
Excellent. Does anyone have any questions?
Just more, thank you, Chair Carl, just more as a comment, just in terms of, if you see that we're, obviously we're trying to adapt to these engagement strategies given the circumstances of the pandemic. And as Hiba indicated, we're trying to offer up to meet with any specific groups. Hiba indicated we're meeting with Federation of Ag, we're meeting with some other groups, including obviously member municipalities. But if there's some key groups that this task force thinks that we should be reaching out to or connecting with as part of this, please let us know in terms of who maybe we should be connecting with or trying to reach out to, and maybe have those one-on-one discussions even with some of those key groups. So I don't know if there's any thoughts around that, but I just wanted to throw that out there as a comment as well.
Warden McQueen, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And two things come to mind. And when we did the green and gray, we did some down at the Ag office in Markdale with a lot of the commodity groups. So I was thinking that maybe that's something to get some feedback. I'm not sure when we're going to be meeting in person, that type of thing. Also moving forward with Grey Brews Farmers Week, which is in January. It is going to be virtual this year. I don't know if there's any spots if you wish, to do some engagement there. You can always contact what's her name at the Ag office? Lori Smith. So there could be some opportunities. I'm not sure if there's any. We usually meet twice a year in the sense of planning that. I know we met in the spring, but I know it's going to be a virtual Farmers Week this year. And but there may be something that may be a way to engage, communicate, because that's how it's communicating and engagement, right? So that may be a good opportunity. Oh, and just one other thing with that survey. I know right now a lot of farmers are out when the sun shines, are cropping, and they may not be doing surveys unless their combine is GPS and they can just sit there and do nothing and they just sort of have nothing else to do. And there could be some that way, that's for sure. But I know it is a busy time right now for farmers if you're trying to, and maybe you have to catch them later on again just to get that engagement. And usually January to March is usually a good time to catch. And they're not going to be going to Florida this year, so.
And we're thankful to have some of our agriculture organizations are helping to spread the word about that survey, which is awesome. And you're right, it is a difficult time. We recognize that. So as Hib indicated, there will be other opportunities for further engagement, especially when we get into that draft policy discussion or draft action items where we think this could go based on what we heard from the early community engagement, I guess. Yeah.
Right. Very good.
Just a question for Hiba as well. Has that a link for that survey been shared on social media where some of us have connected with the county could share it further?
From my understanding, in speaking with communication staff, yes, it's been shared on our social media sites, and it's available through our climate change page on our county website. But I'm happy to send a link around to this group if that's the desire.
I think that would be great. If the rest of the group agrees with that, then we can forward as we see fit as well. Sorry, that's my phone ringing in the background. I have no way of shutting that one off. It's probably my mother phoning me. If we can move on then to item 8, review climate change survey results. Who is doing that? Hib again?
That is me. And this will be probably the last time you'll hear me speak, hopefully. So this is one that I'm fairly excited about presenting on. So I'm hopefully going to just share my screen one more time to the document. So this is the general survey, as I mentioned. Can you all see that? So this is the general survey that went out in late June and early July. It was available for about 4 weeks, and the consultant has put together this document to just let us know some of the feedback that we received from the members of the community that filled out the survey. So I'm not going to go through all of the statistics and data and information that's in this survey. There's a lot of information, some surprising stuff, but I just want to touch on some key ones that I think that were interesting to myself, and then maybe just touch on some of the key policy ideas that the consultant has included as part of the ending of this document, just to get us thinking about some of the work that we think will be included as part of this plan. So just looking at this data, so as I mentioned, there was about 230 respondents that filled out this survey, and based on what they mentioned, there's about 62% of those respondents are worried and concerned about climate change and sustainability in our communities, and of that, 64% think that Grey County needs to be a leader in terms of climate change action locally. So it's important. They see the importance of the work that we're doing, and they see our role in us influencing climate change. So I think from that perspective, I think this policy can be well received and can really help. And the county can really take a leadership role in terms of climate change. One of the other interesting statistics is people in our communities are worried about the growing cost of energy in their households. So 70% said that they're worried about the cost of energy, and that's a huge number. And that's something that's really important for us to think about: is what can we do to help members in our community deal with some of that growing cost of energy? Can we find alternative fundings for them to apply to rebates? Can we do more education on terms of how to reduce our energy use? So this one was an interesting one for me because it highlights the importance of education and really letting members of our community know ways that they can save on energy and the ways that they can become more sustainable. So we asked how Grey County can best encourage and support our development community to increase energy efficiency in new buildings, and this one was interesting because I think that all of these three policy directions are kind of in the same area, and they're both all the members that kind of filled out the survey highlighted all three as an important policy direction. So they want us to focus on regulatory measures to increase provincial building code requirements. So they want us to advocate to the province to make sure that they're more sustainable. Sustainability is an important component of the building code. They want us to offer developers and homeowners financial incentives or create education around potential and financial incentives to become more sustainable, and provide education and guidance to developers to build more energy efficient options. So really getting developers to kind of think about the importance of sustainability and how it can help them in their development, and making sure that they're being leaders in terms of energy efficiency. and from a land use perspective, members who filled out the survey said that 94% of them said that it's really important for us to make sure that the buildings that we do have in our communities, especially in our settlement areas, such as buildings that are not available, that are brown sites or that we need rehabilitation, are making sure that all our policies support adaptive reuse of these buildings. So making sure that we aren't just letting this piece of land or these buildings go to waste. We are making sure that they're being reused in a sustainable fashion. Sorry, just quickly flipping. It's so kind of going into that conversation about electric vehicles. So 70% of the respondents said that they would be interested in purchasing an electric vehicle. I'm not surprised by this. I think, as many of you have mentioned, the technology in terms of electric vehicles has grown in the last 20 years. They're more sophisticated, and you can go further with these vehicles. They are, from an aesthetic perspective, they're sleeker. So there is a lot of interest in kind of buying one of these vehicles, especially if it saves them, if it's good for the environment and good on the wallet. So 70% of respondents said that they would buy an electric vehicle. But some of the barriers to buying an electric vehicle includes the cost of the electric vehicle. And I think one under our influence is the lack of charging infrastructure. So this is 66% said that would be a huge barrier to entry for them buying an electric vehicle. So it is important to consider that, the lack of infrastructure does influence people's decisions in that sense. From a waste perspective, it's not surprising, and 99% of people recycle, which is great. It's awesome. It's glad that a program has definitely taken off. I think it's available in almost all of our municipalities. So it's very successful, and that's great that people are recycling. The other surprising one is that 70% or 75 or 76% of respondents also compost, which is great. That was a surprising number for me, because some of our communities don't have a formal composting program, which means a lot of these members are doing it within their homes or individually. So there is a lot of interest in these programs. People are taking up some of that work in absentee of a formal program. So that's something to consider, that how can we support some of this work that's already been happening in people's homes. Last graph that I kind of quickly wanted to look at is how important is conservation of natural areas to our communities. And this one is, again, very surprising, but not surprising at the same time. 80% said that our natural areas are extremely important to them, almost 90% total. So this means that our natural environment, the shorelines, our forest and trails, all are very important to the community, and conservation of these assets are huge. Looking at some of the policy that was recommended, I won't go through each of these, but I'm just going to highlight some of the ones that I thought were interesting. So from a building perspective, the consultant is recommending potentially develop and implement a voluntary energy efficient retrofit program for existing residential and commercial buildings. I think this would be one that we can do at a corporate level. So taking on that, again, that leadership role of retrofitting some of our corporate assets to making sure that they're sustainable. implemented green building standard checklists and guides for new development. This one is very common in a lot of municipalities in Ontario, but just giving developers the options of how, and educating them on how they can build sustainably and kind of incorporating some of those lead ideas in terms of sustainability into their development. From a land use perspective, it's important that they want to see more complete streets, compact, mixed use, transit oriented growth. So these are some planning terms. So they really want to see, especially in our settlement areas, more compact growth, more mixed use, growth that allows alternative forms of transportation. So it's not relying on just cars, but people can have access to bikes and to the trails and walk to the grocery store or to the work. So it's important to kind of make sure that when we're planning, especially in our settlement areas, we're thinking about mixed use and transit oriented growth. From an energy perspective, establish a local improvement charge program to assist residents to make energy efficiency upgrades to their homes. I think there are many programs like this, and I think some of these are provided by the province already. So just providing education to our residents that some of these programs already exist, and that there are ways that they can access this funding and make their homes more energy efficient. From a transportation perspective, we've kind of been talking about electric vehicles, but really putting in some of that infrastructure in our community so people can make that decision to drive electric, and making sure that all parts of our county are accessible. So if people are looking to travel across from one end to the other, they can get there in a safe manner. From a way, they also want us to, from a transportation perspective, explore the feasibility of establishing a rural demand responsive public transit option, such as the taxi bus, fixed route on-demand bus service. And this is just a great check mark. We're already doing this through the transit planning that Stephanie is doing. So this is a great win for us. This is what the respondents say they want a public transit option, and we're already looking into developing that. So it's a great win from some of the work that we're already doing. And again, this plan would highlight that there are already policies and programs in place that do address some of these concerns. From a waste perspective, explore the feasibility of developing and implementing a standardized county-wide waste management system with expanded curbside organic waste collection. I think the one interesting part here is really just kind of expanding the curbside organic waste collection. So our municipalities already do a great job of providing waste collection, but looking at how we can expand some of that service to also include organic waste, which I think can have a huge impact on climate change and really reduce our impacts in terms of landfill, and also reduce our impacts in paying to have all of this waste go into our landfills. From a food systems perspective, expand and promote farmers markets across the county. So a lot of our respondents indicated that access to local food is critical to them. And it's important that they're able to access food that's grown in the county, that's local. And one way to do that is make sure that there are more farmers market across the county, and making sure that farmers have the opportunity to provide their products in these farmers markets. And lastly, conservation in natural areas. So the two that I want to highlight is implement a tree planting campaign to encourage planting on private property. So a lot of private owners within the community have the ability to impact of the conservation area. That a lot of private landowners are part of, the Bruce Trail, are part of the connected trail systems in the area. So how can we encourage them to continue to plant trees, but also some of our smaller maybe private property owners, that how can we encourage them to plant trees? And that's something that the respondents also highlighted, that they want to see more tree plantings on private property, and then just implement bylaws to restrict cutting down trees. So just kind of really focusing on preservation of the natural assets that we already have, and the ones that we love, and the ones that kind of draw people to the area. That's all I had. If I have any questions on that, I'm happy to take that.
Sue, can I just say something?
Yes, go ahead.
The one aspect of this that the committee might want to consider as we go through all of our planning and thinking about initiatives of that is that there are a lot of people in Grey County who don't have a lot. And some of this stuff on the surface can seem a little bit maybe targeted to people who already have a great deal. And I don't know that it necessarily needs to be that way, that there's things there like adaptive reuse and programs to support, more energy efficient homes, and that would do an absolute ton for people who are just trying to get by in what feels like heat in a barn in the winter time. If there's something that came through to what we heard a lot about in COVID, and we're seeing it now here, is that there's lots of people who don't have great big backyards and access to things. So there's another way of talking about this sometimes too, that we're doing this for everybody, and that there are benefits to all parts of society by making sure that this kind of stuff remains available and accessible to everybody in the community.
Excellent points. I think that would be a good thing to have added to the policy, that we try to look for ways to facilitate that type of thing happening. Warden McQueen, you had comments to make?
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment on the last bullet on the last report with regards to cutting trees and stuff. I think the big part is, we know tree growth is renewable, but there is the ability to have a managed forest plan. So then you got trees that are somewhat compromised or dying, or are, you could say, look, 6 trees, and you can harvest the trees that aren't doing so well. So the trees that are, allows them to flourish and be healthy. And so there's a lot of different aspects in the sense of, just don't cut trees down, because there's tree health and stuff that you have to sort of follow up as well. So again, that goes back to education and just, woodlot management is a very important thing, in the sense that to not only it is a commodity that is harvested at a certain time, but it's doing it well and doing it properly, as we do, as a county forest, we do that. But I think that's some of that messaging that has to be communicated, that it's in the sense of the most potential and the most healthy part of a woodlot and forestry. And that would come from the Conservation Authority as well.
Thank you for those comments. Are there any other comments by anyone? I would also comment that in regards to the tree planting, we could probably partner with Grace Sobel on that one, because as someone on the board of directors, they do a lot in that area as well. So there's certainly ability to partner in that area. Randy, did you have something else?
Yeah, just a comment that we didn't receive the results of the questionnaire until after the agenda was released. So we'll make sure that it's on our website. We have the Climate Change Action Plan webpage that's devoted to projects, so that others can see the results. I know, just based on time constraints, we can only hit on some of the highlights of that results, but there's a lot of great information in that document that I think will be helpful for not only task force members, our internal working group, our external working group, being able to see, but as well as the community overall, and reporting back out to the community, this is what we heard. So that's something that we'll be sure to do. We just received that earlier this week. So it's hot off the press, so to speak. So that's why we're where we're at with that. And I think Kim raises a really good point. And maybe it goes back to, in terms of who we should be engaging and from an communications perspective. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity then to connect in with the task force with respect to this, and just to have their thoughts on what it looks like from those living in poverty conditions when it comes to things like climate change and what's of interest to them. And I think you're right, Kim, like things like energy retrofit programs and other things like that, if they're in housing that's where they can provide some energy cost savings. And that did come out in the survey that people are worried about and concerned about energy costs and the increase of their energy costs. And so I'm assuming that's some of the stuff here, but it'd be great to hear what their perspective is on and what makes sense and what actually will work if we were to develop policies and actions as part of this plan. So I think it's really a good point, Kim.
There are communities who have, taken the stance that the most helpful thing that they can do is to help people, to teach them what the right way is,
Communication.
so that there are community workshops. If you want to come on a Saturday morning or whatever, and we're going to tell you what to do with those old windows. Like, who knows how to repoint a window anymore? No one, right? But if you could do that, if you could fix some of that stuff yourself, there's that way. Didn't need to be pretty, did it, Paul? You could do a lot for people. Maybe there's, you come to the course and you get a little bit something off the cost of the materials to take it home and do it yourself or whatever. But I just think we could engage a lot of people in doing something useful, and maybe that could lead to other things too.
Great.
Just a comment, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Just an overall comment. And we've developed it, and I think Huron County was the first one to develop a rural lens. Maybe we should develop a climate change lens. So everything you do, you have that lens that you sort of look at, okay, how does this apply to this, and how does it apply for that? And it's just something that it's just sort of that second sobering thought, and just in the sense of those that are in social need. There's ways around, like in how you buy your food. So if you buy you buy junk food every day, you're going to have a lot of waste. But if you can buy more bulk and somehow, there's so many, and again, it's education, and I think it's the ability that we can all do a little, we all do a lot, and it's from the level of everybody's, it's awareness and what can we do, and it's education, and how can we improve. And I think everybody feels good about doing something great, and it's just inspiring that whole part of doing something that's good and all that stuff. On the side of trees, I know I look at Pat, and Pat goes, oh no, not more trees on the side of my road. Like, I got root problems, and I got, from infrastructure, you got issues with roots that go into the septic and sewage, and then you got trees that fall down. And so there has to be a plan on, because planting trees is good, because the province a few years ago had that 10 million tree program that was out there that it's good for oxygen and it produces and stuff like that. So it's finding that balance. But just think about the idea of a climate change lens, and it's just something that has been used for other ideas of development, and just something to think about.
Thank you. And all really excellent ideas. I love the idea of helping some of the people who could use that additional help to figure out how to make their home a little more secure through a winter season and that. I think that's an awesome idea. Are there any other comments from any other committee members? If not, then do we move on to number 9, discuss the task force mandate, committee role, goals, objectives, and draft terms of reference. Heather, I'm looking for some direction here. Thank you.
I think it'll be, Randy and I may tag team on this just a little bit. Between staff, we put together a draft terms of reference for the committee to have a look at. We took the objectives and the responsibilities from a lot of the work that you've just heard from or heard about from Hiba and from Randy, and put that together. So we're looking for some input to see if the terms of reference meet the task force's needs, if there's anything more that you're interested in adding in there. understanding that, as you said earlier, Chair Carlton, there's a lot of work already on the go. So we've highlighted those objectives in the terms of reference, and we're just looking to see whether or not we've hit the mark with what this task force is looking for through their term, or whether there's something else that needs to be added.
Has everyone on committee managed to read those, the terms of reference? Or do we want to go through it bit by bit, or are there suggestions? I'm open to whatever committee wants to do. Perhaps Heather, you and Randy want to lead the way through it for us then?
Sure.
Thank you.
There are two specific objectives that I think support what HIBA just went through with the Climate Change Action Plan, and that's to provide input into the development of recommendations supportive of climate conscious gray and the Climate Change Action Plan. So a lot of that work, as you indicated, has been done, and it's bringing those forward and moving this plan ahead, and providing input into measurable impacts for improved county operations related to the environment. So that could be looking at different energy efficient options for our housing units, our transportation fleet, even county administration, and how we look at energy operations within any of our county-owned facilities. And then, working with our local municipalities to lead the way and support them in their efforts as well. Randy, I'm happy for you to jump in anytime.
No, I think that covers it perfectly. I think, and HIBA covered as part of our presentation in terms of, obviously we're at the early stages of our adaptive engagement process, and we're starting to see some of those results. So I think it'd be important to obviously have that discussion with the task force in terms of what we're hearing from the community and from the different key groups that we're hearing from, and bringing that information back to the task force, having a discussion about where that could lead us from a policy action plan perspective. And then of course, when we get to the draft policies and draft action plans, running that by this task force to make sure that you think it's measurable, it's actionable, we can implement them in a way that's not going to break the bank, but may actually result in savings, financial savings and cost savings overall. So I think that's where we see the main role of the task force, but we obviously want to make sure that this task force, if there's anything else that we would like to see added to the terms of reference for this group, happy to take that input and suggestions for sure.
Randy, the only other thing I wondered about, and we've talked about it a little bit, there are some groups out there who have a strong membership or are doing important work in this and trying to work with the public. Does this task force have any I don't know, are we going to try and link up with them or understand their goals and objectives and how they might align, or potentially think about looking at the projects that they're already engaged in, and whether or not it's meaningful to support what others have already taken up doing, rather than having to start things from scratch ourselves. I'm thinking of the climate action people and Graver sustainability and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and HIBA may be able to speak to this better than myself, but HIBA's definitely connecting with a number of those groups. We recognize that there's already some excellent work has already been happening or taking place as a result of those groups, and so that we recognize early on that we need to connect with those groups in order to feed into that excellent work. So HIBA, I think, has done that, and that would be part of the overall engagement, is connecting with those key groups, and some of those, I think, groups there's some of them sit on different
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
groups. I think some of them are also sitting on that external working group that Hiba talked about earlier. So there's definitely some connections that are already happening as associated with those. But I don't know, Hiba, you want to speak to it further in terms of how we're already connecting with those groups, or how we see connecting and then bringing that information back to the task force as a feedback from the overall engagement?
Yeah, so some of the work that I'm seeing, a lot of the group is advocacy. So they're really focused on advocating to local governments or their local councils on trying to take up some of the climate change policy development. So I know the one specifically, Owen Sound has been really active in trying to get council to start working on doing some of the policy development. That's been their main focus. So they're a majority of advocacy focused and then a majority in education focused. So they're really trying to educate members of the community on what's happening in terms of climate change, why it's important to consider climate change, and why it's kind of the immediacy of climate action right now. So most of the climate change groups fall within the two categories, two of those categories, and kind of do work around that. I haven't seen a lot of projects being developed by some of these communities yet. Again, I think a lot of the groups within our communities are kind of starting to figure out what their role is in terms of climate change. They're fairly new, and they're kind of evolving, and there are multiple people's leaders, as I would say, in terms of climate advocacy that are kind of involved in multiple groups. So yeah, I think there's a lot of important work happening, and they're definitely really focused on kind of advocating on behalf of climate change, and then educating members on why it's important to do some of this work.
Thank you. I noticed Deputy Warden Hicks, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy with the terms of reference as I see them here. I just wonder about objective number 2 and reflecting on Hiba's presentation, whether or not the word, it says provide input into measurable impacts. I wonder if we want to insert the word measurable and achievable, because that was in her presentation. And I wonder if the word impacts is the right word, or is it goals? So it would read, provide input into measurable and achievable goals.
I'm okay with that. How does the rest of committee and staff feel about that? Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I like it. It's yeah. I think achievable has always been something that has been front and center. I know in terms of what we would wanting to make sure that these actions and these policies are achievable and measurable. So I think that would be a great addition to that objective.
Thank you. And the only other comment I would make, Madam Chair, is that with respect to each member will at number 2, I think I have a lot of work to do on number 2, become informed about climate change.
That makes 2 of us. I agree. Thank you.
So Madam Chair, if the rest of the committee or the task force is amenable to the terms of reference as amended, then Tara will have she has a motion that says that they be adopted as amended, and we'll just make note that objective number 2 was amended and include the wording from Councillor Hicks. And so we would just need that moved and seconded and voted on.
Okay, so if I could have a mover on this one, please.
I'll move.
Yeah.
Thank
I'll
you,
second.
Councillor Desai.
And
Sorry,
seconded
who's-
by Councillor Hicks.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? I guess is the easiest way to ask. That is carried. I can't actually see Councillor Woodbury, but we'll assume he's not saying no. Okay, so that is carried then. Okay, so our next item is roundtable discussion, initiatives planned in member municipalities. So who would like to start with what's happening in their municipality? Or if I start alphabetically, that put me at the top of the list. So I guess I could do that. We have a number of things going in Georgian Bluffs. I'd have to say probably the biodigester would be our biggest thing, that trying to be deal with climate change, be environmentally friendly, that type of thing. We're just getting started on having our own climate change action plan. Councillor Moore Coburn and I have both signed up for the FCM 3-month course on climate change leadership for elected officials. So we'll both be taking that. So I think what I'm learning here and what I learned there hopefully complement each other. I can't think of a lot of the other things. I would like to go back and comment on the one thing, Hiba, a comment she made about the composting and being surprised at that. The comment that I've often heard is so many of us are in a little larger properties, so we don't want to throw that stuff in our garbage. It can at least go to a fence line or a manure pile or somewhere like that. So it somewhat makes sense in an agricultural area that composting is done a little more than in other areas. I know there's other things we've been doing. We did have a proposal forward for a electric vehicle charging station. I now know I need to look into where that's at. And we've done retrofits at all the arenas and such. So we've started. We've got a ways to go. So Councillor Desai, that'll put it over to you next in alphabetical order.
All righty. Well, so in Grey Highlands, we have a climate action committee that's been tasked with making recommendations to council. Before COVID hit, we sort of had our senior management team make presentations to us as to on what they currently do in order to sort of keeping climate change in mind, and what they do to reduce waste and so on. Right when we were about to get into the meat of things and sort of look at what recommendations we wanted to make to council, COVID hit, and we haven't met since. Yeah, so that's about it. And as the warden mentioned, we are in the process of purchasing an electric vehicle for the municipality.
Excellent, thank you. Deputy Warden Hicks, over to you next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I can tell you that you probably heard this around council before, that Hanover implemented a styrofoam densifier program where we employ some mentally challenged individuals in the community, so we're now diverting all of our styrofoam and it's being densified and sold. So I think we were making money on it. I think of late, the latest I heard is that we're breaking even. But the big benefit there is that we're no longer putting the styrofoam into our landfill. We have completed extensive LED lighting upgrades, both our street lights and all of our municipal facilities. Of course, ongoing in Hanover, you have unlimited free recycling every week, and a lawn watering bylaw about when you can and cannot water your lawn. And we have years ago, my gosh, it's probably back when Savannah was around, that was her initiative. She implemented putting us on the grid in terms of having electric charging stations. We have a number of them. And I remember at the time, the biggest thing around that was, can we attract it? Can we use it as an economic development type of thing, where people with electric vehicles would always be looking for, where can I charge? And especially charge for free. And of course, Hanover would show up on the map because we have a number of these charging stations. That's about it.
Excellent, thank you. Warden McQueen, you would be next.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and great. Sounds like there's some great things going on. Just to add to my Deputy Mayor, Councillor Desai, at our waste landfill sites, we've been diverting mattresses. We pay to have them somewhere else, but as they take them apart and recycle them, and also with drywall, we drywall from being in our landfill as well. We still have to pay, but it's not going into our landfill. And we were saving our foam as well, and maybe we're sending it to Hanover, I'm not sure, but we were diverting the foam at our landfill as well. I think the one thing that's happened from COVID-19 is the reuse. We implemented a container for reuse, like self, instead of having it go into the landfill, that, you know, if it's good for somebody else, like a screen door or a window or something, then maybe somebody else can use it. But I think with COVID-19, they sort of put that on hold because of the, you know, interaction and people coming and going and touching stuff. So I'll have to find out where that is at. And certainly electric vehicles is something that, you know, that we, as our deputy mayor has mentioned, and I have mentioned, is where we're planning to go, but it takes charging stations. And that's something I think we as Grey County need to look at is collectively, from the aspect that people, you know, commute and move around and that sort of thing, that they need to have that. And I think there is an app that's out there that probably tells you or starts to tell you where those things are. So it's about building that infrastructure as well. And so it's about all I can add at this time, but there's probably lots of other things that we're doing. And but it's all, again, we all do a little bit, and we all learn from each other too. What we're all doing is great to share. I think that's the other thing I think achievable, or something that we can really achieve out here, is sharing what we're doing.
Thank you. I agree with you on that. Councillor Woodbury.
Well, we're doing really well as far as the garbage and recycling and compost. Back when the amalgamation happened around 2000, 2002, went to a bin system, and these are large bins. We have compost, blue box, and the garbage. And compost goes out to our Egremont site, and it's free for individuals in the township to take at least one load out of there, and then we can sell after that. So we've been that's really gone over well. As a matter of fact, we put out a questionnaire recently on cutting costs and what would they think if we cut back on some of our carts and things like that, and it was a definite no. At our transfer station, we have the orange box for recycling electronics. We also have the reuse place part of it that has been closed recently, but that was a big part as well. So as far as that end of it goes, we're doing pretty well. About a year and a half ago, we purchased a hybrid vehicle. We didn't have any charging stations in Southgate at all. So we have a hybrid vehicle, and it's in our building department, and it's worked out very well. So we'll be building on for that. Street lights, arena lights, all of our building lights, we've had converted over. So we're working on it, and without an official climate control committee, we try to look at most of the things we do through that lens and see where we can go. So we've got a lot to learn, but some of the little bits I think we've done okay at.
I'll vouch for their hybrid vehicle. It's very comfortable. I was driven in it all the way to Quebec City for FCM last year.
Oh, the two that were with you said it was pretty noisy.
Oh, the two that were with me, you know, they were old geezers, I'll tell you that.
And they brought you home.
No, actually, they didn't bring me home. They just took me there.
Oh, we
I had to fly back.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm wondering, are there any other comments from staff? I see Scott and Pat here being very quiet. I wonder if either of you have any comments you would like to bring forth. And if Pat, go ahead.
I do have one little thing that I just never see anywhere, and it's about field tiles. So I know, you know, the other guys would see this around when you were a kid, you would drive around and there was little pockets of little ponds for kids to skate on and little bits of trees and swampy areas. Now everybody has tiled their fields so extensively. That's all running into our ditches, which probably can't take it, right? So I just wonder, it's not necessarily directly related to climate change, but maybe working with farmers on having storage ponds somewhere, because I think it's runoff has definitely increased just based on that. There's not the water sitting around, and you know, I can't blame them for doing it. They're trying to get their fields dry so they can till them and stuff, right? But it's something that I think probably creates more runoff than people realize. Every time I drive around, I see field tiles being installed everywhere. And you don't want to hinder agriculture, but it'd be nice to work with them a little bit to limit the runoff a bit or keep it on their property type thing, right? That's it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That's an excellent comment, observation. So I think we can make use of that. Scott, I see you put your hand up as well.
Yeah, I've kept really quiet today because I don't really have much to say beyond what Hib has already said. She's kind of the subject matter expert here in our department, and we definitely thank her for that. The one thing I would say, just to kind of build on some of the discussions from earlier from Kim and Randy and others, is with respect to, you know, things like a housing affordability and maybe some of the linkages between this task force and some of the other task force we have, whether it be the agricultural or the affordable housing. And we had planning staff had the opportunity a number of years ago to tour the Habitat for Humanity homes that were being built in Hanover. And I want to say that was 8 or 9 years ago now. And one of the things they really stressed to us is, you know, they build affordable homes, but they don't want to build cheap homes. And they pointed out examples of affordable homes in the past that were built with donated electric baseboard heaters. And as much as it was great to have that affordable home, as soon as the people were living in them, they were unaffordable to maintain. So, you know, to Warden McQueen's comments about the climate change lens, I think there's a lot we can all consider both in this task force and maybe across some of the other portfolios with respect to, you know, and Hiba pointed out in her presentation, the benefits that having that climate change lens could bring to other county portfolios, whether it be housing or agricultural or just kind of saving money. So that's really all I have.
Excellent. Thank you. Again, more really good comments, and I'm sure we can incorporate those in somehow. So the next item would be our meeting schedule. And does staff want to respond to that, what they think the best schedule is?
So I think we have a number of task forces and committees that we need to schedule meetings for. So if this task force will leave it with staff, we will work both internally and with yourselves as members to work on a schedule that we can get out to everyone.
Okay, that works for me if that's good with everyone else on the committee. Deputy Warden Hicks, I see you still have your hand up. Did you have something to say? Thank you. Okay. Warden McQueen?
Oh, I'll let the deputy warden go first.
No, I was just putting my thumbs up to say good on the coordinating the schedule.
Excellent.
So I just have one comment, just something for everyone to ponder. And this is something that is just common sense, and it's probably something that our forefathers maybe considered when they came to this country, is when you're building a home, it's how you place that home. Whether you place it in prevailing winds, the way you set the house with regards to the summer solstice and the winter solstice, and just planting trees for windbreaks. There's so many things you can do that are just common sense in the sense of how you design your home. And, you know, trees act as shade, but they also save on air conditioning. They also save on heating loss because you reduce the wind chill or the wind, there's another wind chill against your home, siting over a hill, siting in a lower spot, you know, issues around erosion and all those kind of things. There's just so much stuff you can do that really can save over the years of that house, you know, 40, 50 years of a home, just not being stuck in the wind or a windbreak. There's just, you know, and you see it back when the settlers came to this country, you know, you see even today, a lot of farm buildings, they'll have a windbreak. Why is that? One is snow and one is wind. And for animals and all that kind of stuff, it's like, we know yourself, if you're out in the middle of wind, it's a wind chill. It greatly reduces your temperature a lot. So there's, you know, there's so many different things that just putting some thought to it that you could really implement in development, just on the planning side of things. So something to think about.
Thank you. Is there any other business? Seeing nothing. Next meeting dates will be determined. Staff will let us know that. Do we need a mover and seconder for adjournment? Okay, may
Yes,
I have
Madam
a,
Chair.
thank you. Would someone move adjournment, please? Ward McQueen, seconder. Councillor Woodbury, all in favor? Excellent, carried. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Have a good day, everyone.
Good job, Madam Chair.